Well, good morning, folks. Um, Greetings after a week of COVID. It's been a ride. I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but let me give you our text first. Our text is this right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Power and Putrefaction. That's the title. The text is 1 Kings chapter 11. And I apologize. I've got a little heater going in here, and it cycles on and off sometimes. So, occasionally you might hear that kind of, fan thing kicking on in the background, and I apologize for that. So anyway, that's 1 Kings chapter 11. We're going to read verses 2 and 3. Before, while you're turning there and before I start, I just, want to tell you how things have gone. As of right now, I still officially have COVID. I still feel a little bit of symptoms. It's been reduced to some sinus stuff. And you can tell I still sound stopped up. And a little bit of, I guess I describe it as kind of an itchiness in my throat. And sometimes it makes me have to cough because it's just kind of like this tickle that it doesn't stay all the time. Usually, for whatever reason, it really bugs me when I'm trying to go to sleep at night. First little bit there, it's like every once in a while I got to cough because it's got this kind of almost, itchy sensation in my throat. It's the kind of thing that makes you cough when it's not a sore throat. Anyway, it's not bad. My energy level is fine. I'm waiting, basically for a negative test result that, if that says that I'm all clear, then I can re-enter, public life. I've spent most of the week pretty much in my little room here, occasionally stepping out to go through the kitchen to the restroom, and then going into walking care to get tested. Yeah, I can go outside, and I've done that a little bit, but I've also been trying to keep myself away from Jordan. But it looks like Jordan has it. He had a test yesterday. We're waiting on the results from that. He had another test a couple days before that said it was negative, and even though he's clearly sick. But come to find out, it doesn't sound like they conducted the test right at walk-in care. And so he had to go back to do it again yesterday. So we're waiting to hear back from that. So now quarantine has become as much about trying to protect him from me as protect me from him, because I feel like I'm beating this thing now. I'm winning, and I don't want to get exposed to a high volume of virus enter my body through me breathing what he might be shedding at this point. So, yeah. Okay, Sister Scott has it too. She's been staying in Limestone, trying to keep us all separated some. Kylie seems to have avoided it so far, unless the little sickness she had the week before was actually COVID, and that's where we got it. Don't know. She really felt only down for a day or two, but she really didn't feel good all week. So it could be that we all caught it from her. There's just no way to know for sure, because I could have gotten it from work. Could have just got it from stopping at the gas station in town, because it's going around. As my text message a little while ago suggests, Sister Barbara, I talked to her on the phone. She's got it, and I want to pray for her and her husband. So far, her husband seems fine. He was sick like a week or two before. It was really mild though, so it might have been just a cold, but who knows? Maybe it was a mild case of COVID. That's why she's got it. She's in the same situation we're in. It's hard to know for sure, but she's definitely got it. She tested positive. She used the rapid test. If you remember in my message last week, the rapid tests, 2 of them did not catch it in me. By Friday night, I've held that little tickle in my throat. One of the last symptoms I still got now. And by Saturday, I was like, oh yeah, this is getting worse. I'm got some stopped up nose and my throat's getting more sore. So I tested. Negative test said, you're negative. You don't have COVID. By Sunday, the symptoms have gotten so, worse so fast. And they look like classic COVID symptoms about what, according to what my wife and her experience on the job had seen. She says, I want to test you again. And we'll need to make sure you get that. I think she had me go and get the test at walk-in care first. And then the symptoms were getting so bad the other day. She says, let's test again and see if we can catch it. it might not be a good idea for you to go to work tomorrow. So I had taken the PCP test, which takes a few days to get back. That same day, though, I took a second rapid test, and again, it came back negative. I don't have COVID, but man, was I sick. And then by late Monday night on the patient portal online, results came back that I did have it. So these rapid tests don't catch it. Now, Sister Barbara, she did catch it with a rapid test, but she did not take it until she had been sick for, 2 or 3 days, and she was really bad sick. So she probably had enough virus in her body by that point that even those rapid tests, which aren't good at catching Omicron, still managed to catch it because she just had so much of it. She sounds on the phone, she sounds kind of rough. She said her energy levels back up. She's feeling better. So it sounds like she's coming through it too. But keep praying for her, pray for her husband. They were supposed to leave this weekend and go spend a month with her in-laws taking care of them, because remember, they're elderly. And they can't really take care of themselves. They were supposed to go down there and take care. Maybe it's just his mom, I think. Anyway, and they were supposed to be gone a month, and now it'll be at least another week before they can go, before, because she has to be negative before she can go, be around her mother-in-law, right? I mean, elderly are the most susceptible. So yeah. Anyway, it's a great day. So pray for Sister Barbara, pray for her husband, pray for me, pray for Jordan, pray for Sister Scott, and of course, all the usual prayer requests. I also have an announcement. Excuse me. 2 weeks from today is Easter Sunday. It's also the first day of a week break we have from work, Sister Scott and I. There is some family out of state that we haven't seen in years and years and years. And we've been trying to go down with our different breaks, and either the break, like these 4-day weekends, they're not long enough really. Plus the plane tickets have just been crazy expensive. And at first we were trying to take the whole family down so that we could see this family we hadn't seen in years, literally. And still plane tickets are crazy expensive. But what we've decided we can do is at least Sister Scott and I can use that break to finally drive down, because it'll be like a third of the cost. I mean, the tickets we were finding, they were over $1,000 a piece. That's just so much money right now. So even though the price of gas is high too, and everything seems to be higher, her and I driving down the same, in her vehicle, we can take a couple of days, and we've got a week, so we can still spend 3 or 4 days there before we have to drive back. So I'm going to be gone on Easter Sunday. So what we're doing next Sunday, we are going to, I mean, if I keep on this track, I don't see myself having to miss service. And the thaw outside, I'm so excited. I have the curtains pulled back, so the sun's coming in, and stuff's been thawing. The parking lot's just about all clear around the church. And I'm so excited that spring is finally here. We can get this mud season going and get it out of the way. Still getting cold at night. We're going to see some 20s, but we're seeing the 40s on a regular basis, getting up close to 50 at times. So unless I have a relapse with this sickness, we'll have service tomorrow or next Sunday live. We just will. There could be a freak snowstorm in April, but man, it's going to have to hit that night and in that morning while we're trying to drive in, right? Because the snow's not sticking around this time. The ground's warming up. It's melting off as soon as it falls. So unless it hits late that night into that morning while we're supposed to be driving to church, I don't see us not having church. So we're going to have our Easter lesson next week, and we're going to do communion next week. And so expect that next Sunday. We'll have a good time. All right. So let's go to our text. Our text is, I think it was 1 Kings chapter 2, I believe. Yeah. No, 11. 1 Kings chapter 11, start reading at verse 2. And here it is. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, ye shall not go in unto them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. Okay. So today's title, as I've already mentioned, is Power and Putrefaction. Power and Putrefaction. God, we love you today. We ask you to put your hand on the lesson, put your hand on my air passages so that they'll stay open and allow me to finish this lesson without too much difficulty. We ask you also to put your hand on Sister Barbara, heal her body, let her grow stronger so that she can get cleared up and they can get down and help out her mother-in-law. Keep her husband healthy and well. Put your hand on Jordan and Sister Scott. Let them get better. And everyone else who is sick and suffering. We know that Sister Lane was sick last weekend, and we just pray that she has a 100% recovery. In Jesus' name, amen. Power and Putrefaction. I don't choose these lessons because what's going on, in current events. But man, so often when we're talking about issues of spirituality and morality, we find that it's so relevant often. And we've been watching for the last month this craziness go on over in Eastern Europe because a power hungry, narcissistic, basically despot at the top of what is an autocracy, which is basically where a country is governed by a powerful few that hold power and don't let go of it. And one man at the top of that has decided he wants to expand it. He's still thinking like he wants an empire, and he's wanting to expand it and relive the glory days of the Soviet Union. And so we see at the top this man who seems to have all kinds of power. And what's been interesting watching this is, our intelligence services and government kind of had what seems like an obvious plan now, but at the time it wasn't the way they normally do things. Instead of trying to allow the Russians to save face and try to work with them behind the scenes, and prevent it, they decided they'd go public with it and start saying out loud, they're about to do this, they're about to do this, they're about to do this. And meanwhile, Russians did not, no, we're not, we're just doing exercises. And then they did it. They crossed the border and they started trying to take territory. And when that didn't work, once again, the intelligence services of the European Union and the United States started saying, now they're going to start bombing people's houses, and now they're going to start bombing, humanitarian, basically civilian structures, and just causing pain and causing death and causing drama as a way to punish and as a way to try to make their will break. And the Russians said, we're not doing that. And then look, here come the pictures. That's exactly what they were doing and started doing, and had been doing more and more of it. The less and less they were able to achieve what they wanted, the meaner and crueler they became. And the whole time, the West was a step ahead of them, pointing out and telling the world before they ever did it. And so it didn't allow this power hungry man at the top and his supporting cast of autocrats to save face while they were doing horrific things. So the only place that they've been able to save face is in their captive audience in their own country. And even that has had its limits, as they've had lots of protests and hauling people off to camps and stuff. And it's one of the things that's been interesting too, and all this, is just how badly the Russians have done. If you want to achieve power, bombing civilian structures like homes, subdivisions, houses, hospitals, schools, theaters, those aren't military targets. I mean, you can make the argument that there's some Ukrainian fighters trying to hide out in there, and that's why you're doing it. But I mean, this is wholesale, massive bombing of leveling of cities. So, but that's not decreasing their military power. It's just punishing them, and that's out of anger. That's out of frustration. They're doing that because they were woefully misinformed about how easy it was going to be to take Ukraine over. Why is that? Why is it that one of the most powerful militaries in the world is having so much trouble with this little bitty country? Now, granted, we've sent them all kinds of weapons and support, not just us, but countries around the world. But still, you've got these little gaggles of men and women, and people of various ages, a lot of times run around the countryside with handheld weapons against fleets of tanks and jets, and they're really putting the hurt on them. Why is it? How is it they got it so wrong? How is it they're so disorganized? And how is it that their readiness, that this supposedly powerful military is breaking down in the field? Sometimes it's not a javelin missile taking out a tank. It's the fact that the tank hasn't been maintained and is breaking down because it hasn't been maintained. Why? What's going on? What we're seeing is some of it, a lot of it is the effects of corruption. It's not a coincidence that you got one man at the top with a few supporting cast right around him, all of whom are kind of probably scared to cross him, and that things aren't what they seem, that he thinks they are, that he doesn't really understand what's going on the ground, because at the top, when you got one guy at the top, it's corrupt. It's corrupt. Everybody's, the few that are there, they're all about maintaining their position of favor. They're all about trying to keep the power structure in place. They're not about being honest. They're not about, having open disagreements and dialogue about when someone disagrees with someone. It's about trying to make sure the big man at the top stays happy. And you can do that for a long time, but sometimes it catches up with you. Being in a position of power can lead to corruption. That's that old adage: power corrupts, and ultimate power corrupts ultimately. And there's another adjective there: power corrupts, and total power corrupts. Power corrupts, and total power corrupts totally. Something like that. You get the gist. And it's an old adage, and it's one that the reason it keeps hanging around is because we keep seeing it happening. In Numbers 22:18, we have a prophet who was corrupt. Balaam, he answered, Balak came to him. He says, Balak has been offering me all these wonderful things. I'm kind of this powerful person here. I'm the one who has a line to God. I'm kind of having options here. And if he would give me his house full of silver, this is Numbers 22, verse 18, and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of Lord God to do less or more. Now, therefore, I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know what the Lord will say unto me or more. Now, the Lord had already told Balaam, quit this. Don't do this. I'm not going to do it. And so Balaam's saying that at first, and he says, but stay here and I'll go talk to God again. He's enjoying this power. He's enjoying this offer of gold and riches. He's enjoying the fawning and the bowing and scraping that this king and his people are doing. They're coming to Balak. All this nation is there trying to seek the help of Balak. Man, is that powerful. Man, and look at it. It is in real time. We are watching the corrupting influence of that favor, of that power, of those riches, and that potential future. We're watching Balaam waffle and vacillate and back and forth between just saying, hey, God said don't, and, well, maybe I can, finagle a way, right? We see this same process at work in King Saul. Saul, at first, he has all the hallmarks of just a good young man. He's helping his dad out. He's going to find those livestock that have strayed or been stolen, and he's humble. And when Samuel's looking for him, he's kind of hiding because he's just a local herder, shepherd, young man of a shepherding family. And sure, he's admirable to look at. He's nice and strong and tall, but otherwise he's kind of a humble man. And it's in short time. It's not long after he becomes king, we start reading where he starts making some bad decisions. I mean, it's within a chapter or two. If you turn over and read Saul's story, that he goes from being this humble lad that is trying to keep the prophet from finding him to all of a sudden deciding, I can make sacrifices myself. Why do I need the prophet? I know the prophet said I have to kill everybody, but hey, I'll keep Agag. He's a king after all, and he's flattering me, and that power is going to Saul's head, and it starts corrupting him. It's a similar situation with David. David, a man after God's own heart, his heart gets kind of dark sometimes. 2 Samuel 11, starting with verse 1, and it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle. It was a custom for kings to be going to battle, but David's like, I'm king now. Look at what I've done, who I am. I'll just sit here and send somebody else. So he sends Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David tarried still in Jerusalem because he's king. He doesn't have to do all that. He's powerful. He's got privilege. And it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from his bed, walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself. The woman was very beautiful looking on, and David says, I'm king. I want her, I can have her. And he did. And then all of a sudden she's pregnant. And he says, I'm king. I'll just, have her husband killed. And what's going on? David doesn't have any real people at this stage who can say, hey, you need to line up. You need to do what's right. Joab is one of the few that would tell him straight, but Joab's crooked himself. Nathan the prophet winds up confronting him later, but it's dangerous to confront a king. It was only just a few years before when confronting this king Saul before David would get your head chopped off, as it did. People got in trouble for confronting Saul. You got javelins and spears thrown through you. You got soldiers sent after you if you question him, even if you were a prophet. So it's David he's suffering from the negative influence of having all that power, but having very few people around him to hold him in check. The cycle repeats itself with Solomon. In 1 Kings 11:2, we have, of the nations concerning which the Lord said to Israel, you shall not go in unto them. And this is our text, by the way. Neither shall you come into them. And Solomon does that. And he falls in love with them. And he gets to a place where there are no voices that can really speak to him or sway him. And he chooses pleasure because he's king. He can have it if he wants it. And that pleasure and that power starts affecting him and making him change his mind and forget his allegiances and forget his loyalties and forget what he's supposed to be about, forgets what he's doing. Most of the kings of Israel and Judah, we have a few that were generally good kings. And even some of those good ones did some bad things sometimes. We've already mentioned Solomon and David, and the same's true of Hezekiah and some of these others that were good kings. They still made some mistakes. But most of the kings, after a while, they turned out to be pretty bad. By the time both kingdoms have developed, this transformation is complete, they're just bad. They're just bad. One bad king after another. And before it's long, both nations God has become so fed up with them that he sends them into captivity. He dissolves them, basically. What's going on? Well, the position of king it's a bad position to be in. It feels like everybody wants to be king. I don't know. Personally, I don't want to be king of nothing, because everything I see about being king, it equals corruption. Here in modern times, we don't have very many nations left that have old style democracies, but there's one or two here or there, and when there's all kinds of corruption and horrible things that go on. Look at Saudi Arabia. It's all about corruption and bowing and scraping and keeping one guy happy. So it's not good to be king. It feels great because you got all the power, but you shouldn't want all the power. Humans aren't capable of having all the power without turning out bad in the end and messing things up and making a mess of stuff. No one guy is smart enough to keep everybody else and meet everybody else's needs and keep it all running. By the time the New Testament rolls around, we still see this corruption going on. We see it with the Pharisees. The Pharisees were powerful. They were this little sect. They were the most educated in the scriptures and the traditions of the elders. They because of their academic prowess and their smarts, they formed power structures, and they began to hold all the different positions of power within Jewish government. The only thing that kept them in check eventually, of course, were the Romans, the Roman occupation. But within Jewish society, they were at the top, and there was only a few of them, and no one violated them, because if you did, you went away. Something bad happened to you. And that's if Jesus had kissed the ring, and if John the Baptist had kissed the ring of the Pharisees, it can be argued that their lives might have been longer on the earth. Not that was Jesus or John the Baptist's goals. Of course, I know there was a corrupt leader that was a part of why John the Baptist was ending, but that corrupt leader, the Pharisees had influence with him too. But had Jesus and them wanted to toe the line and pay obeisance to that power structure, it would have been fine. But that, of course, that wasn't their goal. And that's why the Pharisees would hang around. They weren't just coming around because, they were seeking out the Messiah too. No, they were coming around to see if this supposed Messiah was going to remember who was in charge. We look at Judas Iscariot. Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed Jesus, the one who went and basically connived with the Pharisees and the priests, which, by the way, most of the priesthood in Israel at the time, they were Pharisees. That was the sect that they came from. He had a position of power. We don't think about this, but he had a particular position of power within the 12. Judas did. He was the only one who had control of the money. He held that money. In other words, when they were having to make decisions about where to buy food, Judas had the money. When they had to figure out where they're going to get, transportation across the Sea of Galilee, Judas had the money. And so that was a unique position of power. And he's the one who betrays Jesus. We look at Saul of Tarsus, also called Paul, the Apostle Paul later. He was, by the way, he was of the sect of the Pharisees. He was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, so he was with the top of the pecking order. He was much like the kings of the Old Testament. He had ultimate power. He had very little oversight. He was like a one-man secret police service. And he was doing horrible stuff. What happened here with the kings of the Old Testament? What happened here with Balaam? What happened here with Saul and with Peter, or not Peter, but Judas? What was going on with the Pharisees? All these men, they seemed at some point, they believed they were aligned with what was good and with what was right. And yet, because they held such positions of high power, no longer were they ever being questioned. No longer was there anyone to challenge them. No longer were they having to look inward and check their motivations and try to make sure that they were pure of heart. So when you get to the very top and it's all about power and no one can question anymore, generally speaking, we stop questioning self because no one else is bringing those questions up. It's usually others. This is a horrible reality about humans, but generally speaking, we don't question ourselves unless someone else asks the question first. We don't self-reflect. We don't hold ourselves accountable unless there's a strong sense that someone else is doing that already, or they're about to. Or if we exist in a structure or an organization or in a family or in a group, somewhere, something about where we exist, it's something that calls us into question occasionally to make us do some self-reflection. Generally speaking, unless there is something there doing that, we don't look inward to double check ourselves. We tend to focus outward on problems that are outside of us rather than fixing the flaws inside of us. And that's what happened. These different men, from the Pharisees to Judas to Saul to the kings of the Old Testament to Balaam, they had gotten to a place where there was no one really around anymore to ask those questions. And so it's all about what everybody else is doing wrong. There have been these reports that have come out, and of course they're going to deny it, but no one dares. There was one expert, someone who was actually Russian and had experience with the government and the Kremlin and Putin, who said in a news report that it would be easier to assassinate or take Putin out of power to do some sort of coup. They would do that before they would ever tell him anything that they disagree. They would do that before they would tell him bad news. They would do that before they were honest with him about the mistakes that they were making, the mistakes that Putin was making. They would just rather put a knife in his back than try to reason with him. Think about that. Think about that. That's what happens when you're at the top. There's no one else asking those questions anymore, and we don't tend to ask them of ourselves. Think about it. Balaam, the lone prophet. The kings of Israel, they were kings, which means they were kind of at the top. The prophet himself had to be careful how he came in, if he had a word to say. The Pharisees, sect at the very top of Judah's power structure, of Israel's power structure. No one else dared challenge him. Judas, the only man holding the money. Saul, a one-man Gestapo. Lots of power concentrated in one or just in a few. Lots of power, almost no oversight. So this is an old truth that we've known for centuries, millennia, right? About the corrupting influence of power, and ultimate power corrupts ultimately, right? We've known this, and yet we seem to keep repeating some of these bad old ideas and thinking that, well, it wouldn't happen with me, or it's not true about this one individual. What's the solution? The solution's just like the problem is old, the solution is just as old, and it's still going to be the solution, and the problem's still going to be the problem. It's really not magic. It's nothing new. We have to gravitate toward, we have to buy into and invest in and become a part of relationships, organizations, things that put at their center not a concentration of power, but power sharing, team-mindedness, inclusivity, not excluding so that we have a few at the center or one at the center, but inclusion so that more people buy in. Does it get messy? Oh my goodness, it gets messy. The more people who are in the conversation, the more chaotic the conversation gets. It is true. Sometimes one person can make a decision a whole lot. I mean, it's just true. They can make a decision a whole lot quicker than a group. But there's a danger there. There's a danger of not realizing and not being able to hear whenever you're crossing a line. So we've got to be about the messiness of having all the voices in the room. We've got to be okay with that, as frustrating as it can be. We've got to be okay with that. We've got to buy into that, because at the end of the day, does that mean it may move slower? Does that mean it may have some bad ideas, a lot of bad ideas floating around? Sure. But it also means there's a whole lot of voices in there to shoot those bad ideas down. Bad ideas aren't exclusive to big groups of diverse different peoples and voices and perspectives. Bad ideas can just as easily come from a single brain. In fact, bad ideas tend to thrive in the environment where there are no other voices to undercut them. So we've got to choose. I want you to think about what kind of organizations, what kind of groups, what kind of individuals do you look up to, and do you prize, and do you follow? Are they people who actively work to hear others' voices and consider others' ideas of things? Are they groups and people and individuals that place themselves or are placed in power sharing structures rather than power consolidation structures? Think about that. One of the things that's been all the talk and has kind of taken up some of the focus at the center of this news cycle the past week away from Ukraine and Russia has been that crazy moment. I'm sure you've all heard about it. Maybe you haven't, but there was this crazy moment at the Oscars last Sunday night. I think that's when the Oscars run. And if you haven't heard, here's what happened. One of the presenters of the awards, a comedian by the name of Chris Rock. Comedians at these things, they present awards, but they also crack a few jokes, and usually they're going to crack a few jokes at the expense of all these, celebrities, these big time actors that are gathered there for the award ceremony. And at the very front of the audience was a family, a very prominent Hollywood family, the family of Will and Jada Pinkett Smith, the Smith. And if you don't remember who Will Smith is, Will Smith, he really became famous and well known. I think he was already a hip hop artist, but back in the 90s, he was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was a lead actor in a sitcom that was very popular in several years. Since then, he has done really well in lots of movies, played all kinds of parts. He was in Men in Black series of movies. He's actually, as of Sunday night, he's actually won an Oscar I know of. He's had other nominations. He's one of the most prominent, most high-powered, actors in Hollywood. And his wife has had a very successful career as well as an actor. Well, Chris Rock, he made a little jab at them, because that's what you do when you're roasting, people. You make jabs at the people that are powerful, right? And he did. And one of them was directed at Jada Pinkett Smith. And within a second, Chris Rock, the comedian, is trying to go on with his bit and getting prepared to present whatever award he was about to present. But then all of a sudden, he notices Will Smith has gotten up and is walking up on stage toward him. And Chris Rock doesn't know what's going on. He's like, "Oh, what's going on?" And then, if you haven't heard about this yet, it was quite the situation. All of a sudden, right there in front of a live studio audience with hundreds of celebrities in the room, the community in the room, and all the world watching via the airwaves, Will Smith slapped, and it wasn't pretend. He actually slapped Chris Rock, physically assaulted him right on stage. And of course, there's been all kinds of speculation about why and what's going on, and why he was allowed to do this, and he wasn't escorted out, and why he was allowed to stay in the room. And then later on, he even got an award for Best Actor after doing that to somebody. But I think of all the possibilities for why that happened and why that could have been allowed to happen, at the end of it, for today's lesson, I don't think there's any denying one of the reasons it happened is because this person had a lot of power. He is one of the most powerful, popular, having all kinds of favor given his way because of his career and how much authority he commands in that industry. He felt comfortable enough in a room full of other people watching. He felt comfortable enough to walk in front of everybody. Didn't feel inhibited by all the stares. Didn't feel worried that security was going to try to stop him. He had some privilege in that moment that very few of the people in that room did. And he used it and made a very bad decision. And now he's suffering some repercussions. But he had power. Other people wouldn't have gotten away with that. They would have been hauled away. They might have been arrested. He wasn't, by the way. So power puts us in positions to make bad mistakes. There was another celebrity there that talked to him after he did what he did. He says, you need to be careful. When you're at the top, that's when the devil comes for you. We shouldn't want the top. Jesus gave us a different model. Everybody considered him at the top, and when they considered him at the top, and when the temptations were at that moment, that's when he was being tempted. There's a reason it's called the temptation of Christ, because he was being tempted in that garden to not go through with Calvary, right? And it was in that height of that moment, a part of that final chapter of his earthly ministry, that Jesus did the exact opposite of what a king, of what a head Pharisee, of what a lone prophet. He did the exact opposite of what a man of privilege would have done. He got a wash basin, and he got some water, and he got some cloths, and he got down on the ground and began to wash others' feet. He said, this is not about me. This is about us. This is about serving. This is about others. So, I hope you're not, you haven't been wooed by the propaganda of the powerful. I hope you haven't been sucked in by all of the audacious, arrogant, head wagging, finger wagging. Let me tell you, friends, arrogance, you know what it looks like. There are those organizations, and there are those voices in America right now and around the world that will tell you that the people that are truly evil, that are truly arrogant, they will try to find ways in moments where you can spin it a certain way. But man, don't you really know what it looks like? Don't you know that arrogance and that pride and corruption, that it calls names, you know that it belittles, that it tries to shame, that it tries to bully. Don't you know that? I think we all know that, don't we? Why don't we bend ourselves into weird positions and contort our minds and do acrobatics to try to make these horrible, power-hungry bullies out to be heroes just because they're saying what we like, just because they seem to be fighting for our side right now? Careful. It's an old problem, and the solution's still going to be what the solution's always been. That's not the way. That's not the way. Well, I love you, everybody, and I am looking forward to seeing you next week, because the snow is melting and COVID is going away. And we're going to have our Easter service and do communion and have a good time. And I'm going to have something fixed and made for you to tickle your taste buds, so that you can go home, with more than just food for the heart and soul. I love you. We will see you soon. Bye.